Hey guys, it's Liv here, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about Paradox Pokemon. No, not that disappointment. We're talking about these Paradox Pokemon. Two of the strongest Paradox Pokemon we currently have in the entire roster just got released, Walking Wake and Iron Leaves. So today, I want to go over some sets that you guys could be running as well as common partners, what I think of each of these, and if they'll be viable and competitive. So if you enjoy this video at any time and you want to see more like it, leave a like below and subscribe, and answer the comment question of the day. Do you prefer Walking Wake or Iron Leaves in competitive? Let me know down below. I'd love to see your guys' thoughts, and with that said, let's get started. Now I will say, despite the fact that these two Pokemon on paper actually seem fairly different, I think we're going to see a lot of very similar play out of these. For one, they both end up being fairly fast attackers, with Walking Wake having a 125 special attack and 109 speed. Meanwhile, Iron Leaves is a 130 attack stat and 104 speed. Overall, I think at the very least they both have fine stat totals. They're fairly slow for the Paradoxes, weirdly enough. If we compare them to Pokemon such as Iron Bundle, Roaring Moon, Iron Valiant, and Fluttermane, these definitely sit at the more middle to low end of speed tiers, sitting around Pokemon such as Iron Jugulis and Sandy Shocks. However, I don't think that's necessarily too bad of a thing. With Tailwind teams being on the rise right now, these Pokemon do actually find themselves in a very good position for the metagame, to where if these were revealed as, introduced as of March for the second half of Series 2, they could actually be some pretty decent metagame threats, with cores such as Talontusk being all the rage right now, and they both actually fit fairly nicely on this sort of archetype. In fact, I would argue that this is the best archetype they could currently slot into, Talontusk. I don't think the cores really need much revision. You could truthfully keep Fluttermane, Iron Bundle, Great Tusk, and Talonflame, whichever one of these two you're really running, and you could do a lot of damage to teams. They both are filling very different roles in terms of that 5th or 6th slot, to where even if you are running Iron Bundle with this, let's say for example with Walking Wake, you're still getting a lot out of this, because Walking Wake, for example, wouldn't have a great time against Pokemon like Gastrodon without Terra. Meanwhile, I could just use Iron Bundle to pressure that spot anyway. Meanwhile, with Iron Leaves, for example, while Iron Leaves could be in theory a really good Dondozo check with its moves such as Leaf Blade and Sacred Sword, at the same time though, for sets such as Terra Flying, you still would actually prefer Iron Bundle. So I do think that despite the similar role overlap in theory with Bundle, you won't really be competing with the slot with either. Also, Icy Wind support is great in case you can't bring Talonflame, so I do truly think that you could slot these into the Talontusk teams fairly easily. However, I still think these have a lot of place outside of that particular archetype overall. I do think it's going to be the most brain dead to slot these into though, and I think it will require very little effort to slot these into Talontusk cores, though you could definitely make these work on archetypes such as Sun, maybe Murkrow, especially with Walking Wake could be fairly viable as a Sunny Day Thunderwave user with Haze for Dondozo, which would also be another way to utilize this. You could utilize this just on, basically, these are two HO Pokemon. They're two faster HO Pokemon. You could also get use out of sets such as Booster Energy on both of these bonds. With Walking Wake, actually, even with just a max speed Timid, you do hit over your special attack point, which is fairly valuable as you hit 177 versus 177. So, actually, so you'd probably need to go to 244. The point being, though, is that overall, you could still definitely make this work with your investments. You'll just need to be careful as all with how you're running this. But definitely, though, a fairly terrifying Pokemon to say the least as far as Walking Wake goes. Meanwhile, with Iron Leaves, you will definitely need to dip the attack as well on this Pokemon. As, for example, you see this hitting 171 in terms of its speed tier. So you'll actually need to go down, if you're looking to speed boost, all the way down to 156. However, I do think that going with an attack boosting Quark Drive is fine on this Pokemon, especially when you're opting for crit sets. You can utilize the Sacred Sword with the Scope Lens and Terra Fighting and actually 2-hit KO Dondozo with that, or you can have Red Oko with the attack boost, and it does determine the attack boost actually with the Leaf Blade sets on Scope Lens, assuming it's not a resistant Dozo. So it does make a bit of a difference, but overall, still really both of these are really good abusers of this. Now, I do want to start off with Walking Wake and what I think this will be running first, as Walking Wake will probably be, in my opinion, the Pokemon that a lot of people will be gunning for. In my opinion, this is definitely the better of the two. However, I actually think they're both fairly viable. If I was to compare these to other Paradox Pokemon, I would say Walking Wake probably sits around like the Great Tusk level of viability, I would say. I don't think it's as good as something like Fluttermane, Iron Hands, or Iron Bundle, but I definitely think it's like a close 4th or 5th in my opinion. Meanwhile, I think Iron Leaves sits probably around the viability of Pokemon such as like Iron Jugulis or Sandy Shocks, these fairly decent support Pokemon. Well, not support Pokemon, fairly decent offensive Pokemon to say the least. However, they're not really like metagame picks by any means, but they're still viable, and you could still definitely top cut with these, or even like top 4, top 2 with these. So they're both fairly good Pokemon to use, but I think that Walking Wake will be seeing a ton of top cuts from. Starting with the ability Photosynthesis, obviously, is taking advantage of the Sun Cores, and it's actually a fairly unique Pokemon for this. Now, a lot of people might be wondering, why would I run a Water type on Sun? That seems pretty counterintuitive, and you would be right. Why would you run a Water type on Sun? Typically, it's not a type you would actually desire on Sun Cores unless it's a bulky Scald user. However, you do actually have this signature move Hydro Steam, and while Showdown wouldn't actually show you the effect currently, this actually gains a 50% boost when you have Sun up, making this move not, instead of weakened like something such as Hydro Pump, Liquidation, Surf, etc., you actually gain a boost from the Sun running this attack. Not only this, but you still would gain your typical boost running this on a Rain team, so even if you do fight a team that would run something like Pelipper Iron Bundle, for example, you can still actually take advantage of that core and just go for Hydro Steam and go completely unresisted. Well, you'd still be resisted by Pelipper and Bundle, but the point being is you wouldn't be weakened, like your fire attacks would be. So Hydro Steam already is a massive game changer for Sun. The fact that you now have not only a viable Water type, but a really important, truly game-changing Water type for Sun. This fills the gap that we're currently missing without Pokemon such as Venusaur in the metagame, and even when Venusaur comes back, I would argue this just pairs even better with it. Because realistically, you can utilize this to handle Pokemon such as maybe Gastrodon for, well, you could utilize Venusaur for matchups such as Gastrodon for this, and then you could tear into ground types without having to worry. Pokemon that might, for example, be neutral to grass, such as maybe like a ground steel type. I'm not really sure what's going to come in the metagame, but the point being is just these two do still pair nicely for each other. Even outside of their coverage for like ground and grass, ground and rock, for example, you could still utilize both Pokemon as really good offensive threats to cover Fire's weaknesses, and they do form a really nice offensive core. Water Dragon as an offensive typing as well is fairly detrimental. We've seen this already with Pokemon such as Palkia, and especially having Palkia also be a great example of a Water Dragon with fire coverage. This Pokemon essentially literally just a baby Palkia with a better speed tier and arguably a better ability too, if we're going to be honest. This might even just be better Palkia as far as VGC goes. Truly, I do think it will be very hard to justify not running this on any sort of Sun team. I think it's arguably the best Sun Pokemon we have right now, even, I would say. Because you could just throw it on with some sort of speed boosting set, throw it on a Sun team, and then pair it with a Life Orb, and you could start truly shattering opponents. One of my favorite partners I could think of right now would actually be Manual Sun with Talonflame and going for Tailwind Sunny Day fillers. The one issue with that would probably be the fact that Talonflame does have a bit of 4 moveset syndrome trying to fit Sunny Day on, as you currently do value attacks such as Will-O-Wisp, Taunt, Tailwind, and Brave Bird over it. However, Sunny Day could be a nice 5th slot for this, to where you could boost Walking Wake and use that as a really good sweeper. So I definitely do think that Walking Wake overall will be an offensive menace as far as Sun teams go. But even outside of Sun, there's still going to be a lot of merit with Life Orb sets. I think you could get away with choice specs, but I feel like that on a Pokemon like this, where you'd be primarily clicking Draco or a Water attack in a meta with Gastrodon being such high usage, I don't really think that either of these would want to be locked into moves. It's not like with Flutterman, for example, where really the only viable steals are Goldengo, which is weak to Ghost, and Terra steals, and that's about it. And as far as poisons go, it's really just like Terra, Poison, Garganacl, and that's about it. So I think that Walking Wake would have a lot bigger competition between Terra Grass being a fairly common Terra type, as well as stuff such as Draco Meteor having to deal with fairies, which currently one of the best Pokemon in the format is a fairy, as well as other common steals like Goldengo. I think that it would be a lot harder to lock in a choice. However, Life Orb would still be a fairly good item. You could maybe go with something like a Mystic Water or like a Dragon Fang on this as well. Booster Energy will probably be the go-to for most people. Even on a Sun team, I think it's just a low drawback item you could throw on just in case you can't get Sun up or can't bring Torkoal to a matchup. Though with Torkoal usage actually being fairly high over the weekend at Knoxville, we might actually be seeing a metagame that truly is building its way to be perfect for Walking Wake. So overall, I do think this will be a fairly viable Pokemon. If I had to slot it into my VGC tier list, I would give this thing an S tier for sure. This would truly be one of the most detrimental special attackers we currently have. And I do actually think this will change a lot about how teams play, in my opinion, as well. For Terra types, if you're wondering what Terra types you should be running, I would definitely recommend Terra Fire, as this will help not only give you a resistance fairy, but also Terra Fire's weaknesses would all be covered by your stab water attacks. So I do think that ultimately this would be the Terra type to run. You could still get away with stuff such as water, dragon, even grass I think could have merit, or if you want to get something that would maybe resist freeze dry, you go with Terra Steel, which could be valuable as you would still resist fairy that way. I think you have a lot of good options, though I would say probably if I had to rank, it would be like fire, water, steel, dragon, and then anything else. Probably grass would be the next one. Grass or ground would be 5th or 6th, depending on how you want to cover your Gastrodon, whether it's pre-Terra or post-Terra. But the point being, though, is that I think that Walking Wake is going to be an offensive menace. Truly a Pokemon to be terrified of, in my opinion. And it will reshape how teams are going to have to handle special attackers, for sure. Iron Hand's usage, especially with like a Terra Grass set, will see some upscale, at the very least, for Hydro Steam checking. But even still, that still has to worry about Sun Boosted Flamethrowers, so it's not going to be a perfect check. I'm curious what... they'll probably actually run Terra Water to check this, if I had to guess, with the Salt Vest sets, which could be fairly good, actually. Moving on to Iron Leaves, though, I will say, despite the fact that Grass Psychic isn't typically a good typing, I do think this is the format to be running that. With the Grass Psychic type, you do have the ability to Terrestrial into better typing, such as maybe Fighting, for example. Fighting will probably be the big one, personally. I think between the fact that you can gain Stab on Sacred Sword, which does actually make a huge difference for Dondozo damage, as with the Quirk Drive up as well, you can gain a guarantee to a KO. But even still, you could utilize other Terra types too, such as, for example, maybe Terra Steel or Fairy could be decent defensive typings for this. Or you could go with probably a Terra Dark set just to handle offensive ghosts like Fluttermane, going for ghost attacks. But ultimately, I do think that I would probably personally go with Terra Fighting. I think it's going to be the least drawback option as far as a Terra type goes. Though Psychic, Grass, Dark, Steel, Fairy all have merit in their own right. With the 104 speed, it's a little bit slow as far as the faster end paradoxes go, but it still outpaces stuff like Sandy Shocks, which is valuable, as your grass typing will be appreciated for both that and Great Tusk, which is huge. On top of this as well, with the signature move, Psyblade, I'm not sure why they just went with Psyblade, but it feels kind of generic. I feel like we've literally had Psyblade filler moves that just have longer titles. Point being, though, is that this one actually boosts its 50% from the electric terrain, which is pretty decent. I won't act like it's as good as Walking Wakes, because Walking Wakes actually does counter a specific playstyle that would typically pressure water types. I guess Psyblade gives this thing a Pokemon that can abuse both Psychic Terrain and Electric Terrain, which is pretty good in its own right. The fact that you could still abuse 2 different terrains, like how Walking Wakes can abuse 2 different weathers. But even still, I think it's definitely a significant bump down, because you don't really gain anything that Electric Terrain would have been hurting Psychic types for, unlike Walking Wake, but it's still definitely a decent partner. This is a great Quark Drive user. That attack stat actually will be vastly benefited from Quark Drive. It makes so much Dondozo counter... well, it makes a huge difference in Dondozo counterplay. And speaking of Dondozo, actually, I do think this will fill a similar role to how Galliot actually fit in Series 1 as a Dondozo check. Between the fact that you get moves like Sacred Sword and Leaf Blade, I do think that we're going to see this Pokemon quite literally filling the Dondozo role for this meta as the Scope Lens abuser. Now, I will say, as far as a Scope Lens set goes, you do actually miss a very key move that Galliot did have, being Focus Energy. Truly a huge detriment, actually, as Focus Energy would have made or break this Pokemon as far as consistency goes, though you could still go with Protect, and Protect is still a fine option on here. Leaf Blade, while it will have a decreased chance of critting, is still going to be a high crit move with a Scope Lens, so you could potentially crit fairly often still. And then Sacred Sword didn't really need to crit Dondozo because you just get around the stat boost anyway, so it's really more so about just going for the Terra Fighting in that case. Which, this is the reason specifically why I actually think that Terra Fighting will be great, because not only do you pressure matchups such as King Gambit and Roaring Moon that would otherwise be threatening you, but with the Terra Fighting as well, you do still actually have the ability to boost your stab to 2 at KO Dondozo, which is huge. You could also go for Terra Grass, though. This would help with Earthquake and Wave Crash being still resisted against Dondozo, which is fairly valuable against stuff like No Terra Dozo, for example, as well as Terra Ground, which I've seen a little bit of on the rise lately, but I know that the Flying is still one of the most common, as well as Grass. So I wouldn't say that going to Terra Grass Iron Leaves is your best bet. I would probably partner this thing most likely with, well, you could partner this with Talon. I think the best partner with this for sure is going to be Iron Bundle. They can both take advantage of the Electric Train if you decide to go that route, but more importantly, the two essentially give you a catch-all to both Dondozo and Gastrodon, and still hit a vast majority of the metagame for super effective, actually, which is pretty good. Specifically with this set, plus the standard Focus Sash or Booster Energy bundle that has like Freeze Dry, Icy Wind, Hydro Pump, Protect, you really do gain a ton of coverage with these two. So I think that ultimately this will be one of the best partners for bundle offensively. Well, I don't know about one of the best, because I would probably say that stuff like Fluttermane, Gholdengo, Mousehold, there's a lot of Pokemon that pair better. But one of the best partners for Iron Leaves definitely will be Bundle. I think that Talonflame's still up there. I think that Kingambit, Gholdengo, Great Tusk, even Walking Wake would actually be a fairly good partner with this. And I think they do kind of pair well with each other to a degree, as Walking Wake can hit a lot of fire types for this. And at the very least with Iron Leaves, you could just be a good physical attacker, I guess. The point being, also, I guess you could force Gastron into Terra. And if you were to run like a Terra Ground Walking Wake, you could actually, in theory, make a really good catch-all with this combination as well. I do think that Iron Leaves will be a lot better, I think, than... Well, I can't really say it's going to be a lot better than people are giving it credit for, because frankly, I haven't actually seen other coverage than myself on this currently, because I want to try and go into this as unopinionated as possible, because I didn't really want to steal other people's ideas on this. But I do think that realistically, this will probably get a bit slept on for Iron Leaves, which is kind of a shame. I'd be willing to bet that both are going to be top cutting within the first week or two of them being allowable online, but we'll have to see. As far as other sets go, I do think a Scope Lens set objectively will be the best one. I could also see maybe Choice Band sets. We could even see this thing going for some sort of like weakness policy build, I think, with like a Terra type, because you would definitely need to Terra out of this type, because 4 times weak to U-turn would not be great, but you could throw this on with like a U-turn bundle and just go for the Terra Grass or like a Terra Psychic and go for weakness policy, and that could also be kind of deadly. Overall, I think that Iron Leaves will probably sit around the A tier for viability, to be honest, like a low-end A tier, maybe a high-end B tier, probably A tier though. I think it's definitely better than mons like Slither Ring. But overall, still a fairly decent offensive piece. As far as other options go, oh yeah, you also get Night Slash, which is pretty good. Another high crit move that you could take advantage of. This would be great, especially for the Terra Ghost Garganacles, as between Leaf Blade and Night Slash, you would always have a super effective way to hit them for crit, unless they go with Terra Poison, which means that you have Psyblade. And Terra Poison sets typically don't really run Iron Defense anyway. They're pretty much always Wide Guard builds, so you don't really need to worry about the Iron Defense setup at that point to begin with. But you essentially have this as like a really good catch-all to stuff like Garganacle, Dozo, etc. So it really and truly would be filling that Gallade role. In fact, this quite literally is just faster Gallade, which is actually a pretty big deal, because Gallade, one of its biggest drawbacks was the fact it was an 80 speed tier, which it's an okay Trick Room mon. 80 speed and Trick Room is about as high as you can get viably without just being the cleaner for out of Trick Room matchups. And it's fast enough to where you could take advantage of Tailwind, and it's actually faster than mons like Sandy Shocks or Great Tusk, which are typically thought of as great Tailwind mons already, and this just outpaces those. You can definitely get a lot of mileage out of that speed tier at 104, but Walking Wake being 109 is a huge bump up, because you outpace mons like Jugulus, you outpace stuff like Iron Leaves, obviously. There was another mon that hit like 106, I think it was. I'm trying to remember offhand, but I know I'm not going to. For 106 speed, you outpace the Spathor. Oh, it's Iron Treads. That's why I fucking forgot it. I forgot my gag right from the beginning. But yeah, no, I think that realistically these will both be fairly viable. So whichever one you're looking to use, you'll be able to use them. And if you guys are looking for team examples on how you guys want to run these Pokemon in particular for competitive, I'm actually going to be having 2 teams going up. Tomorrow we'll be Walking Wake, and on Thursday we're going to be doing Iron Leaves. I'm going to be doing exhibition sets against some friends. I've already scheduled these out. So you guys will hopefully at the very least be able to see these on the channel very soon, as at the very least some demos of what could be with these Pokemon in competitive. So hopefully you guys enjoy, and if you want to see some more content like this on the channel and just are looking forward to these new Paradox Pokemon coming out, leave a like in the video and subscribe for more. On Friday, we're going to be going over a DLC breakdown on some of the new Pokemon that we've already gotten confirmation on returning, as well as some ones that will be speculated to return, and even potentially some Pokemon that we're going to predict some types of. So that whole DLC prediction will be on Friday as well, if you're looking forward to that. Make sure you stay tuned for more, as I'm going to cover all of the new content as far as Scarlet and Violet in the coming weeks. And yeah, shout outs to channel members, of course, being Josh K Ultra Player, Mia, Zeke Zero, Mato Shade, and Koemi. Your guys' support on the channel is greatly appreciated, and if you guys want to become channel members, it's only a couple dollars a month. We're going to be doing some ladder series starting in March, so of course you guys are more than welcome to join and get some nice bonus content. We'll see you guys then. Until next time, peace out, guys.